And we are live. And again, for those that are tracking my journey, all you need to do is outbound, be just super normal, and then just ask people if they're interested to join your podcast. And for me, the whole entire step was just connect, say hello, just something candid, and now we're here. I've got Lewis on the show with me, and super happy to have him on. And for those that don't know you, Lewis, can you give us 3 points about who you are, what you do on LinkedIn, and what your business is?
Let's do it. Appreciate you having me on. It's good to be here. Appreciated the little conversation we had before as well, getting the behind the scenes of the various projects that you are looking into and that you're building and your ambitions. And it's all very exciting. And I think you're doing a lot of the right things. So it's cool to be here at this point in the journey so I can be caught up later on and connect with you on LinkedIn and see where things progress. Yeah, 3 bullet points. I run a business called Orbit Marketing. That business writes newsletters on behalf of other businesses. That's very straightforward. Um, on LinkedIn, so this will be bullet point number two. I'm kind of someone who doesn't know how to help myself from just posting what I feel like posting. I'm very off the cuff. I like to speak my mind, sometimes too freely. Sometimes I should speak it more freely. I don't know. But for the most part, my company accounts, which I'm glad that I have, I will respect some boundaries and keep it professional. But on my personal LinkedIn, personal Twitter, I'm just going to say what I feel like saying. A lot of the time, that is valuable, interesting, educational business content, oftentimes repurposed from the podcast that I've been doing for 4.5 years. And other times, it's just random ideas that I'm learning and things I'm thinking about throughout the day. And so that's what I'm doing on LinkedIn. I am a business owner using it as well for lead generation, for connecting with people, for myself, like you said, doing outbound, starting conversations with people who could down the line be qualified for some of our services. And then other times, just genuinely, it's just social media, right? You see something interesting, and as a person, but what is the point of social media? What is one of the points of social media? It's to emulate or model some aspects of what happened in the real world. It's like if you're at a conference and you see someone give a talk on something interesting, it's not a weird thing to run into that person later on and say, hey, I really like this idea that you shared the other day. Like, let's say you see them at the restaurant next to the venue and you start a conversation, then you exchange information, you meet up later, and whatever unfolds from there in a professional context. And that's just happening virtually on LinkedIn. Someone posts something interesting, you start conversations, build relationships. And then, yeah, bullet point number three. I mean, that was a lot of information as well. So maybe I'll just leave it at those two.
No, I appreciate that. And this is the whole idea of me just getting you on the podcast in the first place. Because when I was scrolling through my feed, the algorithm just gave me your content. And your one of your posts was either you having Cody Schneider on. And for those that don't know who Cody Schneider is, I highly recommend you just YouTube his name. And he's got super awesome startup ideas. And the way I got into him was he was telling me more about the importance of marketing and just finding where your audience is. And when I saw you posting about his content, I had to connect with you just to ultimately learn from you because um, the conversation we had a couple of minutes ago, we were just talking about your journey with podcasting, and that's just a portion of your business and how you're starting to grow and connect and build relationships off that. That's just like a media arm of what you're actually doing. So do you mind just sharing your journey with podcasting, how that's helped and evolved your business to what it is right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of activities that we do in life, and they all have, a level of investment of time that's necessary to do them. So you'll, meet plenty of people online who are like, the reason I make money, the reason I'm successful, right? Tai Lopez, right? I'm successful because I read all these books, right? And he filmed that video of him with the Lamborghini in the garage
Mm,
with the bookshelf. He was like, you know why I'm here? Because of all these books. And so and Warren Buffett, right? All these, they're famous entrepreneurs who are like, I'm here because I read. Other people are like, I just play a lot of golf and I meet business owners on the golf course and I network, and that's how I do it. So I think of podcasting as one activity that has been useful for my business career in the background. So it's like I think journaling is another thing, right? You want to have clear thoughts. You want to have positive mental health. You want to be in a good mood. You want to be clear about your priorities. You want to brainstorm. You want to practice the skill of concentration. That's why journaling is a useful activity. And the benefits I've seen from podcasting, it's one, you know, good forcing function. A lot of what business is, society in general, is how do we coordinate human effort efficiently? That's like broadly speaking, the point of a business is to coordinate human effort efficiently towards something that we've all determined, or not we've all determined, but a lot of people have determined is valuable. And that's why we specialize so we can do it more efficiently. That's why we focus on it. And then someone can do it on their own. That's why they hire us versus doing it. There's other businesses, right, that do something that altogether no one else can do, and that's a different category. And anyway, podcasting is a way of coordinating your own human effort around, let's say, the end game. Because if your goal is to learn about a topic, something kind of ambiguous that's not broken down into any definitive guide, like it is useful to read some books, but that's not going to give you everything you know. You need to combine books with experience. But if your goal is to build an audience online, wait, what does that mean? You have to publish content. But what does publishing content mean? You have to have ideas for having content, and how do you get ideas, right? You also want to have not just, the people who, fortunately in our situation here, you organically found me on the feed because some LinkedIn on that day decided to put me in front of you. But other times you want people to engage with your content. And sometimes the people who engage with your content are the connections that you make offline, off the platforms. Then you connect on the platform, and those people become your biggest supporters. So podcasting for me, and this is also how I think about newsletters, like you could view podcasting very myopically and very narrowly to say the point of podcasting is how I meet new people. And meeting new people is good because you have to grow a network, and interesting things can come on the back of a network. But you can also say podcasting, instead of reading a book, instead of going on YouTube, instead of paying a consultant, is how I get free consulting, right? I can interview an expert on a topic who's happy to share their time with me. And instead of just reading their book, I can actually ask them to contextualize their ideas and their principles to my specific situation, right? So someone I've interviewed twice, so I'm a really big fan of, is Scott H. Young. He's the author of Ultra Learning, and he also wrote the book called Get Better Anything, 12 Maxims for Mastery. And he's just has these brilliant ideas about learning how to learn, and the science of learning, and the art of learning, and project management and productivity. And I've read all of his books. I've read like half of his blog posts, and it's awesome. But I'm like, I just really want to talk to this guy. Like, what does he think about this? And now it's my opportunity to connect with him. So there's been so many, situations in my business career when I find myself entering a brand new territory, a brand new domain. And now kind of my formula, if I'm going to have like a rough algorithm, like a rough heuristic for, okay, how do I quickly acclimate to a new terrain, is I want to interview a handful of experts, right? What's that going to do? One, it's going to give me, from the outside perspective, from the perspective of others, perceived authority in this brand new industry right away, because it's the power of association. People see, oh, this guy has conversations with this guy, and then he has conversations with this guy. And then now when I go to pitch the third guy, he already sees that I've interviewed the two other experts in this industry, and all of a sudden I look like an insider. That's true for potential customers. That's true for now when I'm sending people messages on LinkedIn. They see that I have mutuals with the influencers, and influencers, let's say, within the domain that we're talking about, so maybe micro influencers. And then also, it's just, like I said, how I start to build my mental bandwidth and my mental groundwork for this new topic, because the experts are just going to focus on the principles, the fundamentals, the foundations. And so it's how I get a quick sense of like, okay, what's actually important here? I could just go to the library and look up a random book, or I could ask three experts. You've read all the books in this industry, I'm sure. What are they? Where should I start? And they're going to save me a bunch of wasted time.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that, correct me if I'm totally wrong, is what you're doing with the podcast and with the newsletter, you're more framing the information as that you're having real life interactions with experts versus coming in from a book's point of view. Because one, video, I really am bullish on it, especially on LinkedIn. So if you actually hear someone say the information, it's totally different to digest it versus reading it from a book.
Yeah, the emphasis is and the emotion. It's very powerful. It's a huge lost aspect of the communication.
Definitely. So where can you tell me more about how you I'm not too sure what your process is, but how you've transitioned from podcasts to newsletters as an offer for your service. Why are you aiming more at newsletters, or are you combining the two, or what are you doing there with your service?
Yeah, podcasting up until recently, and recently it would be like July 1st or August 1st. I kind of forget the date. Let's just say August 1st, though. Podcasting up until August 1st. So when I started in March of 2020, it was exclusively, like I mentioned, to just meet people and to network and have fun, right? It's just a great way to meet people. And then it was never something I made money from in any meaningful way. A few people offered to pay to come on the show. There are a few situations where I was like, you know what? I'm making money from my side project. How cool is that? Of course, I'll take your money. And then, but that hasn't happened in quite some time. So it's never been the aim to turn the podcast itself into the business. Um, for me, at least, there's plenty of people who probably play that game and play it well. That's just not my game because just the format of the podcast for me is like I've always prioritized my own curiosity over. There's a different set of trade-offs you have to make when you're you can't optimize for every variable that destroys the term optimization. So for me, when I started in my podcast journey, I was optimizing for networking, like intrinsic enjoyment of it, and really just my own curiosity, right? I want to learn what I feel good about learning versus if you're trying to optimize for creating popular online content, right? Then you have to be referable. You have to have a name and a brand. The podcast for a long time was called The Lewis and Kyle Show. So if someone would like that podcast, if they liked Lewis and Kyle, if they liked our style, they liked who we were, they liked who we interviewed. Versus now, let's say I started the newsletter secret show, which I don't have. But if I started that, I'm going to appeal to anyone who's interested in learning how to grow a newsletter, which is way different, right? That's going to be a lot more successful if what I'm optimizing for is using the podcast as a magnet for sponsorships related to newsletter services and lead generation for my own services. So present day, I sold the podcast basically from myself to the business. So I basically diluted my ownership of the podcast by making it equal to my ownership of the actual business. And now the point of the podcast is primarily to facilitate content creation for Orbit Marketing. And I think the best way to create content for me, right? I'm someone who sometimes, undiagnosed, but would probably be able to pass or fail an ADHD test. For me, it's just difficult to sit still sometimes, but it's very easy for me to have conversations. So if conversations, then I can reflect on them. A bunch of interesting ideas come up. I write those down. That becomes the anchor point for all of our content thereafter. So now my business can produce a ton of content just by me showing up and doing interviews with experts and on networking and all of these other things. Now, in terms of how I make a living and how my business survives, the service that we sell is helping other businesses launch and sustain their own newsletters, which is really just a fancy way of saying, or is a more specific way of saying, we do email marketing for businesses, and the type of campaign that we do looks like a newsletter, because I think newsletters are a really effective form of email marketing campaign right now. If they suddenly become less effective, maybe we just transition to traditional email marketing. But our goal is to help our clients utilize their email lists, not let them collect dust and actually turn them into, cash flowing assets that make their business more money, because it's, one of the most slept on channels. And I think everyone should have a strategy for it. So that's what I do in the business. And things I talk about on the podcast would be designed to help instill a series of beliefs that lead someone to that purchasing decision with my business, which is all that we do in a newsletter as well on behalf of our clients, right? We publish content that leads to the prospective customers of that business developing a series of beliefs that eventually converts them into customers. So for someone to become a customer, what do they need to believe, right? They need to believe that content creation is useful. They need to believe that it's important to publish content consistently, and they need to understand. So let's say they only understand those first two, then they themselves are going to publish the content themselves. But then the third one is that, some combination of they're better off hiring someone than they are doing it by themselves. And I'm the right person to hire. So then through my podcast, I just gradually build all of those beliefs through storytelling and anecdotes and just monologues like this, where I go through the logic of that, where I explain, well, listen, is your time as the CEO of this company best spent writing a newsletter, or is it best spent finding talent, finding A plus employees, and they're going to say, I should probably be finding employees and let you write the newsletter. Say, okay, great. And just there's little stories like that that pop up in my content, which is allowing me to organically, you know, I don't say organically persuade and influence the minds of the prospective customers to start to see the world the way I see the world. Because I think everyone should buy from me. And it's just, if we have the same beliefs, everyone would be buying from me.
Interesting. So I'm just curious, based on everything you just said, was it a conscious decision and action you made that you went from your curiosity with podcasting and just doing it for an extended period of time and meeting people, and then using that as a layer, and let's just call that layer like free value or lead magnet that helped stack another layer, which was your actual offer, which was, as you said, email marketing. Was that consciously in your head, or did you just stumble across that,
I'm
or
going to
were they
say,
not together?
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah,
When I started the podcast, I did it because I tried to start a few businesses before
right.
and they didn't work out. And I said, I don't want to start a business until I know it's a good idea. And, certainty, you don't have certainty, but I have reason to believe this is going to succeed. For the reasons I've identified that the things that came before did not work, I want those factors to not be present for this future thing. So based on everything I think that I know about business, there's no reason this would fail from the reason, at least for not for the same reasons everything I did before came. So one of those was that your business has to solve a problem, but it has to offer something people want and or need. And none of the things that I did before necessarily did that. And so I said, I'm not going to start another business until I'm starting a business that solves a problem, until I actually have an idea worth starting. Because I don't want to start a business for the sake of starting a business. I want to start a business because there's a premise for starting a business. My desire is not the premise. The demand in the market is the premise. So I'm going to wait for that. What should I do until then that's useful, right? What should I do with myself such that when that idea comes, I'll be in a better place? Because that doesn't mean like, okay, well, I'm just going to sit around and play video games until this opportunity presents itself. It's like, no, I'm going to go, create my own luck, if you will. And so podcasting, right? Or sorry, not podcasting, but other things that are helpful for if and when that idea came are having a network, are having an online following, and are just by being, I don't want to say smarter, but having more information in your head about the business world. And so podcasting was my way to work on those skills until the opportunity came. It was like a way to occupy myself usefully until then. And then, fast forward eventually, and there's a bunch of, pieces of the story, of course, I'm leaving out here, but eventually I end up in the point where I'm running this business and it's working. And now I'm thinking about as an executive, and I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but as an executive, meaning an owner of the business, where how I spend my time makes a big impact on the revenue of the company. Right? If I spend my time poorly, we make less money. If I spend my time well, we make more money. That I don't know if that qualifies me as an executive or not, but how I execute matters a lot, and it impacts not just myself but my business partners, since I'm the one responsible for sales and marketing. So if I execute poorly, they also make less money. So how I execute matters a lot. And so suddenly, podcasting just for fun no longer was as worth my time as it was. Now that, okay, actually, I have to reinvest into things that are going to result in making more money immediately rather than just kind of building my network in the long term. While it still would have been useful to continue just podcasting for podcasting's sake, it would be more useful to be targeted in my interviews and do them around a purpose, like I mentioned, of reaching out to people where the types of content we're going to create would make for good marketing collateral for this specific business and this specific offer, and where the people I'm networking with would be potential prospects, potential customers, or at the very least, create the right association with people like yourself, right? For example, who are now understanding and have found us because of who we've associated with, other thought leaders in marketing, because we want to be seen as thought leaders in marketing. And how do we do that? By being seen with other marketing thought leaders and kind of put on their level just by pure association.
And I keep rephrasing this terminology. It's not who you know, it's who knows you. That's the biggest one. And one thing that I'm starting to think about is I've had 3 out of 4 guests talk about email marketing. And one thing that I'm getting at is the people that are doing the email marketing, they're definitely saying it's underrated because no one really talks about it. And also, it's also insurance in case what you say on platforms are not allowed. So you can, if you've got
Yeah,
a
I'm
list,
unhinged all the time.
and that's the thing. I feel we were talking about it a couple of minutes ago about how it's being raw, authentic, and unedited is under leverage. And when people are buying a service, they're also buying the personality as well as connecting with you.
Mhm.
So, do you mind just sharing? Because everyone's doing email marketing, but how does personality play for you specifically as a business owner, as an executive, for you to say, yes, I want to work with you and help with your email marketing?
For me choosing clients or for clients choosing me?
The first one, you choosing clients.
I'm a big fan, and I've been on, I don't know, maybe 20 podcasts as a guest, and I think maybe on six of them. And if I'm overestimating on either of those ratios, I apologize. But someone who I frequently recommend people follow online, I find it brilliant. Also, again, very outspoken and aggressive and funny and polarizing. His name's Daniel Fazio. He goes by Cold Email Wizard, and he's amazing. A huge fan of his. And what was I going to say? What does Daniel say? He says, getting results for people is easy if you pick good clients. So for me, there's a lot of front loaded work that you do when you sign on a new client. You could charge an onboarding fee to offset it. You could say, look, I'm going to make up numbers here, but it's $2,000 to get started. And then it's $1,000 per month is the actual service. There's a setup fee and then there's a management fee. I typically don't have a setup fee. And I just try to, because I'm like, look, if this is going to work out, it's going to work out for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, 4 years. Like if they need a newsletter and they don't have anyone, they're going to need it forever. And if we do a good job, they're never going to replace us. So I try to work with businesses, less so personality. I mean, I do want to, like, I wouldn't want to promote someone who I just fully and deeply ideologically opposed to, just because it's like, why am I working hard? Like if I donate to a political campaign, for example, which I have done, but I have donated to political campaigns. And then I'm working to grow a business of someone who like supports the other side politically. I'm like, I'm just funding both sides of the conflict here. If I'm like helping this person get more money and they're just going to use the percentage, but sometimes there's a level of overthinking, right? There's, um, people understand the idea of consequences. A lot of people don't understand the idea of second order consequences, and even fewer people understand the idea of like higher order consequences than that, which is like the consequences of your consequences, the butterfly effect, like the impossible predictability of what happens as a result of what happened as a result of what happened as a result of, towards infinity. So I try not to think too much about it. My top priority is retention, right? And retention comes from them seeing great results, and they see great results as a proxy of, you know, how big is their list when they start out. I don't want to say that's the most important factor because I've had incredible results for people with lists of only 100 people. But more people, more shots on goal, right? Just bigger probabilities here. How expensive is what they sell? How good are they? Did my camera disconnect? No, just my phone has 20% battery. We'll make it. How good are they at selling what they sell? So even if I am to help them generate a ton of appointments from email, if they're not going to close any of them, then they're not going to net make more money, right? If they're going to fumble on the last step. So the more mature as a business they are, the more case studies they have, the better their sales reps are, the more testimonials they have, the more dialed their sales processes. So I'm just helping them, be slightly better. But it's going to have a bigger impact. Versus if I write the best email in the world for someone who's sending it to two people and doesn't have a mature business, he's not going to see any promise from it. So I more so select for people who, just by us existing and being there, prepare them for big success.
Gotcha. So based on what you just said at the end there, are you gonna say yes to anyone that is just starting out and doesn't have any infrastructure yet? Would you do like a done for you service, or are you more consulting plus working with them as well?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know, when you're publishing this or when someone's watching this, Our goal is to be able to serve as much of the market as we can. Right. If I have the ability to choose between two clients and it is an either or, not a positive sum game, but it is a zero sum game, either or situation, I'd rather work with, the business that has more money because if they have a bad month, let's say they make 100 grand a month and sales dip by 20 grand a month, still making 80 grand a month. And let's say my service is a grand a month, they're still probably not going to flinch. They're not like looking at their expenses, even if they take a 20K hit versus someone who's only making 20K a month, a sales drop by 20K, then they have no money and they're going to fire me even if I'm doing amazing. There's just more things out of my control that could kill me with a less mature business. But I still, depending on the growth trajectory that this person's on, I'm willing to entertain taking that journey with them of zero to, the end goal. Just a question of, that person might all of a sudden switch their business 3 months in because it's like this. Like I've worked with a number of clients early on that don't do that. Like they went out of business, not because of us. Like, one was in the real estate space. He just stopped doing real estate because real estate's tough right now. And he's not going to keep paying us. He's out of business. There's no amount of newsletters we could have written to change that for him, right? He was at the end of his rope. But we have consultative packages to have more of it done with you for people who aren't ready to make that full investment.
Gotcha. And again, going based on what I've been asking people, especially in the email marketing space, it's all about testing. So that comes with just doing the consulting part about like who your customers are. But what are your expectations when you're talking to someone like a new client about how much you have to test to find the right plan before you do the right copy, or is it the right copy before you do the right plan to get positive reply rates or for them to say yes to hop in on a sales call, etc., to actually close a deal?
Yeah, we are more in the school of do things and study rather than like over plan. Right? It's like let's do things, let's see what happens. There's no cost or there's trivial cost to segmenting and trying different things on a section of your list. So every industry is different, every customer is different, every buyer journey is different, right? There's obviously fundamentals of human nature and psychology that are consistently the case, but everyone's in a slightly nuanced situation. So I have people all the time ask me, well, you're the expert, you tell me what to do. I'm like, well, in my opinion, what we do is we do something. Like right now, you're not doing anything. So we have nothing to learn from, and there's no way for anything good to happen. I'm not here to get it perfect on the first shot. I'm here to send something we're proud of on day one that you're excited to send, that you're like, hell yeah, this is a sick email. But we're gonna be wrong about some things. We have to make assumptions. It's imperfect. But imperfect action gives you, action produces information. That's not a saying I came up with. That's something that I don't know who takes credit for it, but whoever deserves credit for it, give it to them. Action produces information. We'll try a bunch of things. We'll segment the list. We'll get creative. And within a couple of weeks, we'll know a lot more than we knew then. And we'll be able to iterate intelligently and work towards a really, really effective strategy.
And also, there's something else I got asked. I'm not too sure what your take on it as well. Is everyone measures email metrics differently, and people don't really like the open rates, the positive reply rates. But someone did mention something about how long it takes or how many emails it takes for them to actually close a deal, and they use that metric. For example, I'd sent 1,000 in the last week, so it took a week of 1,000 emails. Okay, what do we have to look at, and what levers do we have to pull to make 1,000 go down by 10% to speed it up? Do you ever look at something like that, or how do you look at your metrics, or is it based on different circumstances for each business?
I mean, circumstance is a factor, right? It's an analytical process doesn't change client to client or situation to situation. What's every step? Step one is subject line, right? Well, step zero is deliverability. What Rich is like, are your messages actually landing in the inbox? Step 0.1 or like step 0A, it doesn't matter. Step one is subject line. And we can take subject line to mean literally just the subject line, or it's subject line plus preview text plus profile picture plus your name. Because if your name is like Just what do they see in the inbox, the headline, right? What do they see in the preview in the inbox? Does that get them to click? So if your open rate, I guess that's what we call step one. Step one would we'd call the open rate. And open rate consists of all the things that I've just established there. But you have your open rate, and if your open rate is 90% versus 10%, that's the difference between 900 opens and 10 opens out of 1,000. So step one's the open rate, and then really it's kind of, I don't want to say all bets are off from there, but it's either the reply rate, or if you have a direct call to action, like click this link if, or check out our site if. It's whatever that take rate is on the call to action. For simplification, it's just called a reply rate, where you're not giving them the information. You're just saying, would you be interested in discussing? And so the only way for them to take the action is to reply. How do you increase your reply rate? And so that's what you iterate. So maybe once you've determined your open rate, you have different ways of improving your reply rate. And then from there, XYZ. But it's then thinking, right, do I have a funnel, or do I have I mean, you always have a funnel, but do I have a mature, sophisticated funnel? Or am I just trying to, get a response immediately? Like I'm interviewing someone saying, hey, right now, do you want this? Yes or no? And they say yes, or they say no. Versus your offer, for example, is for them to join a newsletter, or for them to follow, hey, I saw we're both into XYZ. I post a lot about that. We both like college football. I just have started posting really actively on LinkedIn about college football. You should follow me. And then that person follows you on LinkedIn. So all you're selling is for them to follow you on LinkedIn, right? But then once they follow you on LinkedIn, they're seeing all your LinkedIn posts. And then you do one of those posts where you're like, I just made the ultimate guide to college football, reply, roll tide, and get the guide. And now that person's in your DM and read your PDF. And then inside the PDF, it says, by the way, I send out sports picks every week for people who want to win their fantasy leagues and make money from betting. Sign up to this here. And so, there's your reply rate on the original cold email for the percentage of them that are converting to LinkedIn followers. There's all these subsequent steps. So as you think of every major conversion rate, every major bridge for people to cross in your business, those are all the opportunities for improvement. So for me in a newsletter, right, do you segment the list based on some arbitrary delineation? Maybe not arbitrary. Do you write a different campaign, or have a different ingredients plugged into a different spot, depending on if someone has hopped on a call or not hopped on a call? Maybe you say cold leads are people who, anyone who's not been on a phone call with someone from our team is a cold lead. Or anyone who, or maybe it's like an aggregate score. So if they've been to our website, if they follow us on social media, that's 2 points. And if they've been on a call, that's 5 points. So this version of the email goes to anyone from 0 to 1. This one's anyone from 2 to 4. This one from 7 to 10, in terms of like that aggregate engagement score. When someone hits a 9, then we have a cold call person, call that person. It's a whole, you were talking earlier about layers, and with time you build more layers. That's why, this is kind of why it's not a cop out when I'm like, there's nuance to every circumstance and every situation. Because if somebody has a big funnel where they have lead magnets, you're not going to try to, they have lead magnets, they have a podcast, they do free audits, they host events in various cities, and people come to those events, and they do freebies, and they have samples. Then you're probably not going to try to just get people to buy in that first interaction. You're going to just try to get them into the funnel. And those people are going to be really effective at nurturing prospects. Versus if you're just like, look, bro, I want a customer tomorrow. It's like, all right, well, just pick up the phones. Just start calling, right? Do cold calling. But if you're in the long game, you want to build up brand awareness. I just think newsletters, my point, if I'm like planting a flag in the ground here, is that for most businesses, if you can afford to, which most businesses can, a newsletter should be a piece of that broader ecosystem.
Is it mainly because it's the seed that you just plant at the get-go, and as your personal brand grows, that's your chance just to collect emails as you just continue to pick a route, if it's organic, paid, or something. You're just collecting emails at some stage, even if you're not selling right now. You've just got the email just in case. So whilst you keep building content, etc., they're going to build that trust. Even if it's not day one, it could just take maybe 5 or 10 content from you to binge for them to be like, okay, now I see what he's doing. I'm glad I still got his email.
Exactly. And again, if it's a complicated sale or a simple sale, right? So for e-commerce, right, if what you're deciding is like a fidget spinner, all you need someone to do is like be in the mood to think that sounds fun. Let me part with $5 versus, I've sold in the past data infrastructure rebuilds through Orbit Metrics, the sister company of Orbit Marketing or parent company. And that's complicated, right? You have to say, I trust this person to take ownership over the source of truth of information of my business. That's big. They need to trust you, right? That might take 10 emails for them to be like, these people, you know, are highly competent, highly responsible, certified, have solved technical problems before, are not going anywhere. Versus like, yeah, that seems like a fun toy. Let me spend $5 and or like, oh, it's happy hour at the pub. Like, oh, let me just go to the pub, right? It's not a high consideration purchase versus a low consideration purchase. Um, so that's why there's a lot of circumstantial thoughts. But you, as a business owner, right? This is a very trendy mental model, I guess, that I've been hearing a lot lately. There's a recent Morgan Housel book that I think goes on the subject, which is like, what are some things that never change? This is something that classically people speak about, an insight Jeff Bezos had, right? Jeff Bezos didn't want to focus on what was going to change and how he can respond to it. He wanted to focus on what was not going to change. And people always are going to want good quality service. They're always going to want lower prices. They're always going to want faster delivery times. So as long as Amazon always focused on being excellent at those things, that would be really amazing. And similarly, you can think about in your business, what's not going to change, right? Businesses need to stay top of mind somehow, whether you're top of mind by putting up a billboard on the highway or by sending the physical cards to people in the mail in their physical mail inbox at their front door. You send them a magazine, you send them a postcard, you have someone show up at their front door with cookies, right? It's important that you're top of mind with the people who are most likely to be your customers, such that when they would need your services again, you're the person they think of. That's never going to change. And email, at least for the foreseeable future, is a very effective way of staying top of mind. And so that's kind of like, if you want to stay top of mind, which you always should, that's a good reason to invest in email. And then likewise, and then I'll kind of wrap up the point here. What's also never going to change is that a certain type of customer, or really customers, benefit from more information about you and your services and the problem. Like, you're more likely to make the sale if you are perceived as an authority, if you're perceived as intelligent, if you're perceived as trustworthy, you're more likely to make the sale. That's not going to change. So if you want to invest in being perceived as more trustworthy, as more knowledgeable, as the authority, then you'll want, you consider a newsletter, because a newsletter is an effective way to do that. So that's the sales conversation, right? That's how it goes. So that's how I think about it.
To me, honestly, it feels like email is not dead. I do want to respect your time though, because I know you're super busy and you've got a call shortly. But
I know I took my glasses off
I just
because they
want to
glare like
say
so badly.
you're all good.
There we go.
I'm super glad we had this conversation, and so super happy you could fit me into your busy schedule. Just to summarize, one thing that I took, or a couple of things I took out from the conversation is the concept of your journey, or part of your journey from going from podcasts, which is your curiosity leading to solving a problem that not what you want, but what the market is hungry for, which has led you from curiosity, building a network, to actually having an email marketing service. I feel like that's super awesome. And in my head, it's just reaffirming the idea of, okay, just layer things until you can understand or get a pulse of what the market wants. And ultimately, it sounds like email marketing for you in your head, and I can kind of see it in my head, that it's underrated because no one really talks about it. And then from there on, you're just layering and just going on these kind of nuanced niche issues that people aren't really thinking about. And just action more than planning is what you should be doing if people just want some kind of service when it comes to email, or not knowing any information about the customer. So really learned heap from you. So I appreciate the conversation.
Dude, thank you for reaching out.
So for those that do want to reach out to you, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so there's a booking link for potential customers at orbitmarketing.io. There's for a period of time, I'm still a person who takes those calls, maybe not forever, but for a period of time, that's still me. And then I'm on LinkedIn, on Twitter, cutting back a little bit, fortunately, on Instagram. I see my DMs. LinkedIn's definitely your best bet. LinkedIn's 100% your best bet. And just, mention, you when you connect with someone, you can leave a note. Just mention that you listen to me on Philip's podcast. Like, oh, okay. Because otherwise, I won't know who you are. So don't accept every connection from every random person who reaches out. But if you're like, I listened to you on Philip's podcast, then I'm like, oh, a person I invited to connect with me. I will accept this invitation and start a conversation with you. So that's how you can do it.
Lewis, I appreciate your time. And that was pretty much the thing that I also want to say to everyone else that Lewis has taught me. If you want to grow, ask that question at the end so you can actually network with people from a mutual connection because it's way more easier to get a mutual connection than a stranger. But that's something I just want to leave for listeners is that just is way more easier than just cold outbounding a stranger. If someone just says, I'll drop your name, that's a big, big plus. And Lewis, I really appreciate you just stating that at the end because that's super important for listeners and anyone else listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
And super
I should
appreciate the
think about it
conversation.
myself, honestly. I should be like talking to my SDR and be like, we got to make sure we're doing more of that.
Yeah,
But yeah, why would they? It's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know that you listen to this podcast unless you told me. So you're
exactly.
just another person. Now you've taken yourself, if someone asks me a genuine, thoughtful question, most of the time I will answer it and be like, yeah, I'm, just kind of helpful by nature, happy to help people. But if someone just sends me a connection request with no message, I don't know who you are.
Exactly.
So I may or may not accept it because I don't know you. But if you say this thing, right? If anyone says like, I listen to your podcast, listen to my podcast as well, and what they say doesn't sound AI generated, I'll also check that out. I'm like, oh, this person invested in learning from me. Like they actually care to talk to me specifically.
On that note, if you
Anyway,
guys reached the end of this podcast, add a note on LinkedIn. Okay, do that. But that being said, Lewis, thank you so much.
thank you, man.
All right, have a good day.
You too. Cheers.